Everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about specifically what it means to have your Saturn in Capricorn or Saturn in the 10th house. My name is Brandon. I do astrology videos here on YouTube, and I am quite excited to be doing this Capricorn series here. I have a playlist down below where I've gone through every single planet and every single sign and house prior to Capricorn in the 10th house. So I have everything between Aries and Sagittarius and the 1st and the 9th house down below, every planet between the Sun and Saturn. So if you have any planets prior to Capricorn in the 10th house, I would recommend you check out that playlist because there will be a video down there for you. And if you are brand new to this and you don't know anything about astrology, and if you even have Saturn in Capricorn or Saturn in the 10th house, you're welcome to check out the birth chart information down below to generate your birth chart to get a better idea of where these planets are at. If you have Saturn in the 10th, if you have Saturn in Capricorn, those sorts of things, and just kind of more layers of how astrology kind of works in that regard. So, really excited about this. This series is such a fun series. This is the final video in the Capricorn 10th house kind of installment. And it's been so fun to kind of just talk about these deep dives of what Capricorn and the 10th house mean. And so I am going to be breaking this video apart into a couple different portions. First one is really just what Saturn means within astrology. Second to that, we're going to be talking about what Saturn in Capricorn means, and then finally what Saturn in the 10th house means. So if you have your Saturn in Capricorn but not in the 10th house, I'd recommend you watch that portion, and vice versa. If you have someone that has Saturn in the 10th but not in Capricorn, make sure to check out the 10th house portion. But of course, watch the sign-based video first. So if you have your Saturn in the 10th house, but let's say it's in Gemini, watch the Saturn Gemini video first, and then watch the house video, so you kind of get these kind of layers of how astrology kind of works in that way. So that's the introduction there. And obviously, of course, this is YouTube, so if you guys like my videos, please like it, comment, share, subscribe. Just press that little button. It's going to help me a lot. As I'm sure you know, you hear everybody on YouTube say that, so like that's nothing new to you guys. But yeah, without further ado, let's go in to talk about what Saturn means in astrology. So Saturn in astrology has a very powerful way about it. It is very strong, very stable, very karmic, and it has a lot to do with what we are here physically to do, meaning what we are brought onto Earth to do, kind of bringing it into the 3D. So a lot of the time, when we have a very strong Saturn, up until the age of 30, and a little bit before then, we're not really that aware of what it is we're supposed to do here, what we're supposed to do for work, what we're supposed to do for our career. We can have a sense early on. It can definitely be established early on, but it's not typically until that Saturn return, which is around the age of 28 to 30, we're really going to have that solid understanding of what we're here to do, why we're here, what we want to accomplish, those sorts of things, and it'll kind of make a lot more sense. And I did do a video with another astrologer where we spoke about specifically the Saturn cycle and, of course, the Saturn return. And we did a podcast down below, so feel free to check that out for sure, just because Saturn is so strong in Capricorn, and any Capricorn placement is going to have a lot of just connections to the Saturn return. So when you have Saturn in a Saturn-ruled sign, the Saturn return becomes a lot bigger of a deal, and it becomes more of a prominent sort of lesson for us, okay? Now, Saturn in astrology, it has a lot to do with an area that we just feel restricted, that we don't feel like we're prepared enough for, that we're not prepared enough for. We don't have the resources, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the time underneath our belt to be able to say that we have accomplished this thing. Saturn is like the strict kind of teacher, the strict rule maker, the one that tells us what to do, how to do things, and tells us what we're doing wrong a lot of the time. There's a lot of critical nature to Saturn. Up until that Saturn return, as we've done the hard work, as we've worked on ourselves, as we've become these sort of really grounded and reassured and confident people in our own purpose, really, is really what Saturn is about. It is a lot about delaying. It's a lot about, denying and not allowing things to really come to fruition right away. So there is a sense of patience that's required of your Saturn placement, wherever that may be. And really allowing yourself to work very, very hard, very, very diligently with the knowing, the internal knowing that something is going to come of this. There's going to be some repayment of all the work and effort and energy that you're putting into whatever this career is that you're particularly working towards, or whatever area of life that Saturn is in. Because Saturn can be in Capricorn, but in various different houses. And so it is important to know when we think about Saturn in Capricorn and just Saturn in general, it's important to know that things take a lot more time when anything's involved with Capricorn. And time is your biggest asset. It's your biggest, most valuable thing that we all have. And when you're young, the time is wasted on young people, where there's so much that they can do. And Saturn really reminds us that as we get older, about the importance of being able to go and be patient, be diligent, and also cherish our youth, right? Cherish things not being so hard and so difficult and so heavy, right? Because that's what Saturn really typically coincides with, is a lot of these heavy weight and heavy responsibilities, and being an adult, and learning how to carry the weight of whatever Saturn's trying to teach you. And Saturn's going to have a lot more power, specifically in the signs that it rules, one of which is Capricorn, the other one is Aquarius, and then it's considered to be exalted in the sign of Libra, meaning that it works at its highest potential there. And you'll see that Saturn opposite those signs as well has its own kind of struggles and its own lessons. And I've spoken on pretty much every single Saturn sign by dignity outside of Aquarius, which I'll be doing next. And so you're welcome to watch those videos as well if you have Saturn in any of those kind of dignified spectrums there, because Saturn and Capricorn is obviously like this video, and then Saturn and Aquarius is the other Saturn ruled sign. And so Saturn opposite those is where Saturn's considered to be, in exile or in detriment. And so we'll see Saturn in Cancer and Saturn in Leo as being these kind of more difficult places for Saturn to be. And then in the same vein, if we have Saturn in Libra, where it's considered to be exalted, we see Saturn in its fall opposite that in Aries. And so there's a lot of different ways that Saturn can come across, and the karmic lessons that it really brings about. But all those lessons are really focused around patience and really, really being hardworking and diligent, and working very, very hard at everything you want to accomplish, and being patient with yourself and with the time that is ahead of you, and consistently chipping away at something, building towards something, some sort of future that you're really working towards. That's really what we tend to see with a strong Saturn. So yeah, that's really a lot of what we see there with Saturn. Also, of course, the Saturn cycle is really important. So if you do have your Saturn in Capricorn, it's really important to watch that Saturn video that I have done. But then also, if you are a Saturn ruled chart, either Capricorn or Aquarius rising, there's going to be a lot of importance that this Saturn placement is going to have. And then, of course, if you are a Capricorn or Aquarius sun, the Saturn placement also has a lot of importance there too. And then the final part about this is there's this idea about sect, which has to do with the whether you're born during the day or whether you're born at night. And if you're born during the day, it is said that Saturn is more advantageous, more constructive during the day, versus if you're born at night, Saturn is a little bit more difficult to deal with. So there is some relevance there that needs to be kind of factored in. I don't really work a lot with sect. There's a lot of astrologers that do. I just personally don't, just because there's so many different things to look at within a chart, and sect is definitely one of them and very important. But there's plenty of videos online outside of my channel as well for that. So hope this helps. Let's get into specifically talk about what Saturn means in Capricorn. Okay, so we have Saturn in Capricorn. So Saturn in Capricorn is obviously where Saturn is naturally at home. So it does quite well here. It really understands a lot about the specific use of power, use of patience. Now, when we put Saturn in its own sign, much like all the other videos I've done where we've had planets in their own dignity, there's a sense of understanding. There's a sense of like inner kind of resonance with the themes of that planet, and it makes that planet quite strong, right? Meaning that Saturn is in its own sign, it knows what it's doing, it knows how to work in and really create delays, create kind of restrictions, create patience. It really knows how to do that very strong, like very, very, very diligently, and very, it impresses that very, very heavily, where there's a lot of patience, there's a lot of responsibility that you're able to really feel at an early age. And it's important to see where Saturn's at by house as well, because that's going to have a really big lesson that is really kind of like, there's this bigger weight than that Saturn gives in Capricorn, because it knows you can handle it. But then once you go through your Saturn return, it's done, you're good, it's cleared. and you feel like this big weight you've been carrying for so long has made you so strong, and you understand that, and now you're like, okay, cool, now I can, step away, and now I can, go and pursue the next thing, or I can now solidify this thing. There's a sense of solidification that Saturn does in Capricorn. Now, Saturn's lesson in Capricorn versus Saturn's lesson in Aquarius is a little bit different. Saturn in Capricorn has a lot of lessons relative to your place in the world, relative to your career, because Capricorn rules that sort of place that we go to publicly, the public perception. So when we think about Saturn in Capricorn, we think about this kind of very slow kind of power towards leadership, power towards being in a place of authority, being in a place of the top of a company, right? There's a sense of Saturn delaying your ability to be seen as your stuff's put together, right? There's this kind of overconfidence sometimes in an early age with Saturn in Capricorn, that that you're going to get there, you're going to get it, but that still doesn't change the fact that it hurts when it takes time, and there's a lot of patience that you have to kind of come to terms with Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. And you'll see a lot of the time that there's these people will have so much power and so much power given to them, but it takes a lot for them to learn how to wield it, how to manage it. So you'll see managers with really strong Saturn and Capricorns. You'll see long-term investors, long-term leaders, but you don't know what they had to get there. And a lot of the time, prior to the first Saturn return, there's so much that they've had to kind of consistently work towards. And there's this really strong work ethic that's typically instilled in them. Obviously, you want to look to see what Mars is doing, other parts of the chart in that regard. But Saturn overall is going to be this very powerful kind of presence in the native's life, where they're going to be doing a lot of things relative to career, relative to their place in the world. There's a sense also with Saturn and Capricorn, because both Saturn and Capricorn both rule the father figure and the paternal kind of striving to whatever the authority is out there. There's a sense of going and wanting to become that authority when Saturn's in Capricorn. But there is also kind of a delay in the relationship with the father as well. When Saturn's quite strong, it kind of doesn't allow you to necessarily get to that top, or to have that relationship and that adoration from your father or from whomever that kind of public figure might be, that boss, right? There's a sense of a struggle to appease to the authority. There's a sense of kind of like wanting to connect to a higher, not necessarily a higher power, but a higher place in the world, connecting to that. It wants to connect to that, but it's like, okay, how do I connect to that? And it takes time, and it's doing it in like a clunky way, or in a way that isn't quite clear, or is very, very transactional, very relational. It's not really pure, and that's what Saturn wants. It wants you to understand that the power in patience and the power in slowly getting to that place of the adoration, of the self-validation as well, I think is something you'll see a lot with Saturn and Capricorn, as well as Saturn in the 10th. There's a sense of self-validation, a sense of kind of, okay, I know what I want, I know how to get it, and now I deserve it, and I deserve to be up here. Because Saturn's not going to give you your place in the world. It's not going to give you that success until you've earned it, until you've taken the time, until you've taken the diligent work and really, really worked really hard to get to whatever point you're getting to, and whatever your goal is. There's a lot of goal setting with Saturn and Capricorn, and it is ultimately because you're trying to strive to something bigger than you, and you want to be powerful. And that's the thing. It's about what you utilize your power for, what you utilize your leadership for. And so there is a lot of themes around connecting to something that is not, I don't want to say not pure, but is not ideal at first, right? It's like it's very much started from the bottom, now you're here in that sort of way, but it's almost like you have to go and get this crappy job to lead you to this job, or to lead you to this thing. There's a lot of very, very prominent delays with Saturn in in Capricorn. Saturn in the 10th house has this as well. There's a delay in your ability to connect publicly or to be seen publicly. Whereas like we had Mars in the 10th house and Mars in Capricorn, these are where, you know, they know the goals, they know how to do it, but there's a little bit of a fight. Saturn here is just going to feel like there's such a delay, such a like, oh, can't go that way, got to go this way. And it's almost like learning how to work with less, learning how to work with, like how to get to the top when you came from a lot of difficulty, or when you know you want that thing and you want that promotion, but you realize you have to jump through all these different hoops to get it. And you have to do a lot of different things relative to your career, relative to wherever Saturn's at as well to get there, right? Saturn's placement by house is going to be really important for this particular Saturn because Saturn is so strong. So it's going to really kind of impress upon that lesson of Saturn in Capricorn. And Saturn in Capricorn is really about striving for that place in the world, striving for that accomplishment and saying, I worked really hard to get to this top and get to this place, and it keeps you there. That's the good thing about Capricorn. It keeps you stable when you reach it. When you learn that lesson and you build that foundation, it keeps it stable in such a powerful way. And so I think there's so much to be said about the Saturn Capricorn story, where there is this sense of really, really understanding your time, understanding your patience, understanding your path is not as fast and linear as other people. And if it were to be fast, you wouldn't appreciate it as much. That's the thing with heavy Saturn energy. It's, you need to learn to appreciate the journey. As slow as it might feel, as slow as it might be, appreciate the time that it takes for Saturn to go and teach you whatever lessons it's trying to teach you, and slowly alleviate that pressure that you've been working so hard over and over and over again to consistently like rebuild, consistently build against, build towards, right? There's a sense of just building that is really, really strong with Saturn in Capricorn. There's a very strong sense of, okay, I want this thing, I'm gonna go after this thing, but oh gosh, it just feels like it takes forever, right? And so there needs to be a goal. That's the thing with Capricorn placements. You need to have a goal. You need to have a goal of something you're working towards, and it needs to be like a very long-term goal, like a 30-year plan. Because Saturn's going to really want you to be diligent, to be responsible, to have a sense of trusting in yourself too. There's a lot of inner trust that's really important with Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, because it delays your ability to trust that you belong somewhere, that you belong going towards this goal, or that this is something that is really, you know, worth the wait. And it's about coming to terms internally with that kind of process and understanding that you're going to get it. You're going to get it. It's very much there, but it does take time. And granted, a lot of people that are watching this with Saturn in Capricorn have already gone through their Saturn return, if not their second Saturn return. And so we don't really, you've learned a lot. You've learned a lot, you've understood a lot. You've gone through so many different things throughout your life. You know, the last time Saturn was in Capricorn was, 2017 to 2020. And then prior to that, it was around the late 80s, around like 88, 89, 90, where it was there. And that's a lot of the Saturn Capricorn story has already been really, really gone through. So there's a sense of really becoming the elder in this regard for a lot of Saturn Capricorns. And then obviously the Saturn Capricorns that were just born in that 2017 to 2020 era, they're just starting their Saturn square in a couple years. So they're quite young. But it's a lot about them wanting a place in the world, wanting to have a career, and feeling like it just is delayed, it's denied, it's all these different things. And there's a sense with all the Saturn and Capricorns that I know, it's like they now are the wiser ones. They're the ones that are helping some other people. They're the ones that have this understanding of responsibility, of career, of working towards the goal, of having a place in the world that you really have worked towards building, and taking that effort, taking that kind of consistent work. Saturn really does do a great job in its own sign in Capricorn, in especially creating a sense of wisdom. That's one of the things that Saturn really does impress upon people, is this idea of wisdom, and helping you feel that all of what you went through has taught you so much that you then want to help others. There's so much kind of mentorship ability with Saturn in Capricorn, even though mentorships are typically like Jupiter related. Saturn and Jupiter are a really big, they're a really big team in astrology. So it is important to know your Jupiter sign as well as your Saturn sign to kind of get a better idea of what beliefs are informing your responsibility, beliefs are informing your career, and how you could be a mentor. And I think there's a lot of wisdom for Saturn to be in Capricorn, to become that old wise sage, or that one that has experienced so much hardship and is able to impress upon other people different ways to go about it, because they've learned to not go in this direction and not go in this direction because it's going to lead to this sort of, roadblock, right? There's a sense of understanding the roadblocks, understanding, the sense of responsibility that it takes, and a sense of patience through going through and failing a lot. And failure is not a bad thing. It's just a redirection. And that's something that I think Saturn is very, very evident in everything that it does. But in Capricorn, it really does push that onto the individual. It really makes it very known that Saturn is very much trying to get you to understand that it's okay that things don't happen right away. It's okay that they don't happen as quickly as we would all want them. Because it's part of that learning process that is so important. Part of the learning process is going through and figuring out what you don't want or how to not do something. And Saturn says no. Saturn says no to so many different things. Jupiter says yes, Saturn says no. And so it's important to understand that no's can be so powerful. And a lot of the time with heavy Saturn placements, you'll see that there will be this sense of, because you were said no at a certain age, it made you work so much harder at that thing, right? Like if you had Saturn in Capricorn in the 3rd house, right, for example, and you were told at an early age that you didn't know enough, or you didn't study enough, or you weren't smart enough by a teacher, by an elder, by whomever, authority figure you were looking at, by your father as well, or just whatever primary elder person in your life that you look up to, that you're striving to be like in some way, or that you're working under. They're like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not smart enough. You don't know these things. You don't understand this field that you're working in this sort of, industry. And then Saturn in the 3rd house in Capricorn is like, okay, you don't think I understand that? All right, great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to really, really diligently focus on the understanding process and surpass. A lot of the time they will surpass their elders, or surpass those that, may have kind of put a thumb on them. And that's also true for Saturn. Saturn does that in general, but that's why it's important to look at the house placement, because I think it makes that house placement really important, because Saturn's like, okay, we're going to really make the lessons in that house really heavy, because Saturn is in its own sign, right? It's like, okay, let's really impress the desire to have a career relative to these house themes. And so there's a lot of power in that. And I think it's so important to know, as a Saturn and Capricorn individual, that you have the power to make those choices. And the choices you make throughout your life, yes, they're going to lead to failure. Yes, they're going to lead to difficulty. But that's true for everyone and anyone. It just so happens that yours are going to feel a lot heavier, like there's a lot more responsibility and weight and importance on you to go down that path, specific to Saturn and specific to the house that Saturn's in, as well as the aspects and all those other things, to really create a place in the world, create a career, have a job, right? There's a sense of responsibility with Saturn there, and it's really important to understand that there is a deeper reason that Saturn is trying to teach you this lesson, and it will take time to understand that throughout your life. And every Saturn cycle is going to kind of bring up different things relative to your responsibility with yourself, your trust in yourself, your trust in your place in the world, that you can rebuild. And that's the thing, Saturn in Capricorn has such a gift about building and stabilizing and understanding what's needed to be responsible, to rebuild, to work really, really hard, to support something, support themselves, support a family, support their career, support a relationship, support a community, all these different things that Saturn can do. And so if you have your Saturn in Capricorn, I'd love to hear from you. Obviously, like I said, most of you have gone through your first, if not your second Saturn return. And those that are in there, that are the most recent Saturn in Capricorns, aren't even like 7-8 years old at this point. So there's a lot to be said on this. And I think the Saturn in Capricorn story is going to take time, obviously, as it always does. But look to those that are older than you. Look to your elders. but also understand that you are meant to figure out your own path. And there's a sense of outdatedness as Saturn ages, because it does want to really stabilize those things from the past, but it also needs to go and build something towards the future. And that's where Saturn goes into Aquarius, and I'll get to that in the next one, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, I think it's really important to just really understand your whole chart in this regard. If you have your Saturn in Capricorn, please let me know how this has been for you. And if you like how I talk, if you like how I do astrology, feel free to comment down below and reach out to me, and we can set something up in that regard. But like I said, you guys, like these Saturn and Capricorns, you've already gone through a lot. You've already established a lot of things. And so there's so many things of having a career that you've been able to work towards that I think is really powerful. And so continuously work on yourself, keep doing those things, work towards long-term retirement, because that's what Saturn really wants to do when it's in such a strong sign as Capricorn. And it wants to go towards such a powerful place in the world, and it will get it. I promise you, it'll get it. It might take a lot of denying and a lot of difficulty, and it's a lot of heaviness. But as you learn those lessons and as you're used to carrying that weight, it will get easier. And be patient with yourself as you age, and understand that aging is such a beautiful but also such a sad process in both ways. And it's very bittersweet. And so it's understanding of that kind of bittersweetness of age that I think Saturn really does bring up during the Saturn cycles, as well as just having the prominent Saturn. So hope this helps. Let's move on to the next part where we talk about specifically what Saturn means in the 10th house. Okay, so we have Saturn in the 10th house. Now, Saturn in the 10th house is going to have a lot of similar themes as Saturn does in Capricorn, where it's going to delay that connection to a public sort of perception, public success, place in the world, and kind of being a leader in whatever industry that you might be in. And the thing with Saturn in the 10th that I've seen throughout the years is Saturn in the 10th has this kind of quality of really working towards figuring out what their job is meant to be, what their career is meant to be, what their place in the world is. And so you'll see with Saturn in the 10th, as well as Saturn in Capricorn, you'll see this kind of inability to figure that out, to discern what that is until a little bit later on in life, around the first Saturn return, around the late 20s, early 30s. And you'll see that there will be this kind of really heavy responsibility to have it all figured out, right? Because Saturn's going to want you to be a boss, to be in someone in the world. It's going to want you to have that sense of leadership, that sense of responsibility, that sense of structure, and it's going to really create a very, very patient person, whether or not you want to be relative to your place in the world and your career, because Saturn just wants to create this very responsible person to how you are being perceived. And that's something I've been talking about a lot with this 10th house series, is the idea of being perceived publicly and your reputation. And so with Saturn in the 10th, there can be a sense of your reputation being tarnished, or something you have to build or rebuild over time. This is true for Mars as well at the top of the chart, but different reasons. Mars at the top of the chart will ultimately lead to success, so will Saturn, but the Saturn sign really dictates what type of success you're going to have and how you're going to go about that, right? If we had Saturn specifically in Aries right at the top of the chart, that's going to have this kind of quality of, really, really kind of fighting to regain one's reputation in that way as well, because Saturn really wants to have this kind of solid career. It wants to kind of have this place that can't be kind of thwarted. Think of it as kind of a king building a castle. Saturn in the 10th, it wants to have this career, this kind of stable kind of castle that it can kind of sit in and say, I've done all this work. But while you're building that castle, you're going to have a lot of difficult things that you're going to have to do, and you're going to have to contend with. You're going to have to contend with property taxes. You're going to have to contend with the different things around you, resources, and being resourceful to get up there. People not wanting you to be a part of that career field, or there's a lot of just delaying your ability to be a leader, and to have a place in your career and be established professionally. There's a sense of, like I said, there's a sense of reputation. There's a sense of really building something that is long lasting relative to your career, relative to your public image. And once again, Saturn's sign is going to really dictate a lot of what Saturn's going to delay, or rather how Saturn's going to delay its success in the sign of whatever sign it might be in that 10th house. So kind of just to start off the bat, let's talk about Saturn with Mars. So Saturn in either Aries or Scorpio is going to have quite a lot of fighting to get to where they need to be in their career. There's going to be this kind of stronger desire to have a place in the world with Saturn in a Martian sign. Saturn in Aries, like I said, there is a sense of needing to regain your reputation because Saturn is going to really be kind of like the gavel, right? The one that really lays down the rules. And in the 10th house, those rules are public. It's how you're perceived, like how you're perceived publicly, how you're putting yourself out there. And in Aries, it can have this kind of like, I am just doing it because I'm impulsive and I want to do this thing and I want to be a leader. And it's almost like you're doing it too soon. And you're fighting to be a leader too soon. However, as you understand how to be patient with Saturn and Aries, there can be this very, very strong career over time in something that is very you focused, right? Aries is very much focused on yourself. So this could be someone who runs a career in fitness, but needs to obviously become physically fit to have a career field like that. Like you can't go into asking to be a personal trainer when your body itself is, not really healthy in that way. It's not something that is, really helping you in any sort of way. For your image, right? It's almost like you're jumping the gun on certain things with Saturn in Aries, and wanting to be, a leader, but it's like you haven't done the work yourself to get there. That's very much, I think it's really equivalent to like going and having, not being in the best physical shape and then wanting to interview as a personal trainer. It's really, that is very on the nose for Saturn and Aries, and it can be across the board. There's definitely something with the father, typically with Saturn in the 10th house, but Saturn in Aries definitely has that there, where there's like an unavailable father or a father that isn't quite capable of giving you the proper modeling to help you get towards your goals. And then we have Saturn in Scorpio. Similarly, this is also a Martian sign, so there is a sense of needing to understand how to utilize your own willpower. However, this is a distrust of authority. So this is where you're going to see a lot of the Saturn in the 10th in Scorpio, a lot of unethical bosses, a lot of abusive bosses, in potentially more ways than one than just the career, and wanting to be someone and be powerful and be up there in the world. However, getting there is going to take some time, because you're going to have to deal with all the toxicity that is within top-down structures, within leadership, within the world. There's a lot of this is someone who would likely go into a career in either law enforcement or politics, right? But it's about them being pure with how they're utilizing their own influence. And so this is where you're going to see a lot of toxic work culture, toxic careers that they then have to be aware of while also trying to purify it. This one's really cool. I really like the Saturn Scorpio story. I loved that video when I did it. So obviously watch your Saturn video as well, because I've done all of these. So like these are all already done, outside of the Aquarius and Pisces ones that I'll be doing next seasons. But watch those videos for more context. That's really going to help you. Saturn and Venus ruled signs, so Saturn in Taurus or Libra. This is a lot, obviously, more of the self-internal, like I don't belong to be there, imposter syndrome things. With both Saturn in Libra and Saturn in Taurus, there's a sense of just not feeling deserving enough to be in the spotlight or to have that career, not have the resources to do that. Saturn in Libra at the top, there's definitely more careers relative to judges and legal systems. Saturn in Taurus can do that as well, but Saturn in Taurus is more about wanting to have a beautiful life, wanting to see how all those people that live those luxurious lifestyles, those lavish lifestyles, how do we get there? How do I get like that? How do I, become similar to them, right? That's what you'll see with Saturn in a Venus ruled sign. And there's also a sense of understanding one's financial limits to reach your goals, to reach your place in the world, and then also one's social limits with Saturn in Libra. And then Saturn in a Mercury ruled sign, so Gemini or Virgo at the top of the chart. This is where you're going to get a lot of public scrutiny on both ends. Even Saturn in Gemini is going to get it. There's a lot of gossip, a lot of knowing who to follow, who to listen to, learning how to inevitably listen to yourself over time. But Saturn in the 10th, there is a sense of working for some structured thing. So working for an ad agency, working for, social media management, working for medical industries, and working your way up in that regard. But there's a sense of a lot of critiquing here with Saturn on the top of the chart. It's a lot of critical nature from other people about your place in the world, being up there, being public, those sorts of things. And so you'll see with Saturn in the 10th, it's like there's this just kind of, people are so hard on you because you're so hard on you because you deserve to have a really important place in the world, and you will with Saturn in the 10th house. No matter what the sign is, you're going to have a very important place in the world as you learn Saturn's lesson relative to whatever Saturn's sign is, right? Saturn in Gemini and Virgo is about you using your mind responsibly, using your word responsibly. Be very careful with how you are utilizing your own knowledge and putting it out there, what messaging you're using, how you're responsible for your messaging. It's really important with Saturn and Gemini, if you have at the top of the chart, not just Saturn and Gemini in and of itself, but Saturn at the top of the chart in Gemini, be aware of your internet history as well as your messaging, what you were written on social media throughout the years. Saturn in Virgo has that same sort of message, but it's a little bit different. This is more about the health routine. This is why they typically go into medicine or service-oriented jobs, because they're working on it themselves. So this could be really great doctors here, like really great doctors on all of these Saturn in the 10th. They're very successful, but they've had to work really diligently on studying and learning and becoming very confident in their ability over time as they age. And then it is important as well to look at Saturn in cycles. So I did do a video with another astrologer, you're welcome to check it out, where it's in the description box, where we talked about Saturn's cycle, and it's really important to understand that, no matter what your Saturn sign is, to know where Saturn's at and how it's affecting you in the maturation cycle. There's a lot there that I think is really important for us to learn, especially if your Saturn's in the 10th, because it's angular, meaning it's at a really important part in your chart. And it's going to be a big public lesson is how you restrict yourself, how you restrict others, how others restrict you, how you don't allow yourself to be in a place. Imposter syndrome is just generally Saturn in the 10th, but I think Saturn in a Venus ruled sign, like I said, is very imposter syndrome. Saturn and Mercury is imposter syndrome about like not keeping up mentally with those conversations. And then Saturn in the Moon and the Sun signs, these are both things that are, the Saturn in Cancer at the top, this is like a very... this is a harder one. I'm not going to lie. This is definitely a harder one. I actually know someone with this particular placement, and it's not the easiest. It's almost this kind of public kind of scrutiny because they're bringing emotions to places they don't need to, right? But once again, Saturn in the 10th is still going to give you success. It's still going to give you that ability to have a career. It just needs to be integrated on an emotional level and understood on an emotional level. And there's a sense of emotional boundaries that's needed to have a place in the world. But then ultimately as well, also dismantling those emotional boundaries. It's really strange here. It's a harder one because they need to learn emotional boundaries to have a successful career, and when to put that personal professional divide, and when to kind of have a personal relationship or have a personal opinion versus not. And then same with Saturn and Leo. It's like there's so much of a personality of yourself that's there. It's like, how much do I show of myself? And that's the same for the Moon, right? Saturn and Cancer, they both have this quality of like, I'm not allowed to show as much of myself as I want, because the public and the systems that are within my field only allow this much expression, this much expression of my emotions, expression of my identity. And so you'll see over time with Saturn on the top of the chart in either of those, Cancer or Leo, there's like I want to be this person, I want to be up there, I want to go after this thing, I want to be able to be seen in a very vulnerable way. But every time I do, there's a lot of scrutiny. And that's the thing, like there's so much more scrutiny with Saturn in the top of the chart in Cancer or Leo. It's really hard to work with. But ultimately they're meant to be leaders, but they need to also be seen in a very personal way relative to either Saturn or Cancer or Saturn and Leo. And that's where it's important to look at the moon sign and the sun sign for these people, as well as looking to the other placements that are ruling your Saturn sign as well. And then Saturn in Sagittarius and Pisces at the top of the chart. This is where the meaning behind why you're doing is really important. You're going to see a lot of cultural kind of significance with Saturn at the top of the chart in either Sagittarius or Pisces, but it's really about your ability to kind of bring that into form, bring that into a sense of making sure you are teaching the correct philosophy, the correct meaning, the correct purpose behind what you're doing. Because typically with Saturn at the top of the chart and Pisces or Sag, they're given a platform to teach something. And this is the same for Saturn and Gemini and Virgo, that the Mercury Sagittarius Saturns, the Mercury Jupiter Saturns, they're going to have this kind of teaching platform, this kind of like professing of truth platform. And it's about really being very diligent about your cultural awareness with Saturn and Sag as well as Saturn and Pisces. But Saturn and Pisces has more of this kind of other earthly sensitivity of awareness because it's a water sign. And so there is a lot of mental health things in this regard with Saturn and Pisces at the top of the chart. There's a lot of mental health, spiritual health kind of things where, once again, like Saturn and Aries, Saturn at the top of the chart, it's like you need to purify your reputation. So there's a sense of acceptance of your struggles that is very true for Saturn at the top of the chart in general, but allowing people to see you and project upon you of what they think you believe, what they think you are. That's true for all Saturn at the top of the chart, but allowing you to be this kind of, allowing you to take it in and really be hurt by it, because it will hurt up until that Saturn return, until you really are able to solidify your sense of identity, your sense of self, and say, you know, this place in the world that I have, I'm going to utilize it this way. And so there's a sense of self-acceptance that Saturn really brings over time as you age and as you understand your place in the world and the reason as to why you had to be pushed and prodded by other people to, you know, influenced by other people, influenced by the systems, influenced by society to bring you to this place at the top. It's almost like, especially Saturn and Pisces, there's almost like this kind of like spiritually brought around different areas and not knowing why you're getting there. And then it goes to the top of the chart and you're like, okay, now all of what I went through makes sense. All of those spiritual, mental health, kind of private struggles I had make sense. And it might be private, it might be public, right? With Saturn at the top of the chart in Pisces. So there's that aspect there. So there's a lot about just understanding your meaning behind why you had to get to where you had to, why you had to go through what you had to go through to get to the top, to get to that career. That's what you'll see with Saturn and Pisces and Sag. Really interesting one. If you have those, I'd really be interested to hear how that story has been for you. And then finally, Saturn in its own sign, Capricorn, Aquarius, top of the chart. This is once again how you are utilizing your influence, how you're utilizing your power, how you're utilizing your place in the world and working towards that. What you're doing now that you are the boss, now that you are your own authority, what are you doing? And that is true for all Saturns in the 10th. Like, you become your own authority in the world as you don't allow the world to influence you as much. You don't allow people's words with Mercury Saturns or people's belief systems with the Jupiter Saturns to really influence you. You allow yourself to just simply be and understand that you have your place in the world and this is what was showed out for you. This path is your path and your path alone, and accepting that. And then Saturn in Aquarius has a very similar vibe, except this is a lot about being able to know what your value is you're providing for society at large, and allowing it to be a bunch of different multifaceted things, and what service you're going to give, what value you're giving to your audience, what your audience is, who you're doing it for, right? That's the thing with Saturn and Air as well, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. It's about who are you doing this for? Ultimately, it should be for you at the end of the day, but that takes some time to realize that. But there is a sense of listening to a lot of different opinions with Saturn and Air about who and where and how you need to be doing things. And then Saturn and Fire is a lot of, you're doing too much. People are kind of stifling your ability to be creative, to be inspirational, to go after your goals, and there people are kind of pushing you to go after goals in the way that they believe is right or the way they want you to shine and show up. And then Saturn in Earth signs is all about just resource management, managing your time, managing your money, managing your career, and consistently doing that work. And then Saturn in Water, it's about managing those emotions, managing your own emotions, other people's emotions, the vibes around you, and creating things that are good for your own mental sanity, and the emotional kind of spaces that you're in. And Saturn in the top in Fire, just real quick, is going to be something that is very inspirational careers that are very much helping other people, inspiring people through their actions. A lot of you being kind of the pinnacle of light, right? With a fire-rolled sign, kind of creating inspiration, movement in people's lives, being those leaders through just pure bravery alone. And then Saturn and an Earth sign at the top of the chart. These are careers that are relative to resources, resource management, you know, being able to really be the ones that know what your values are and know how to work with less, whether it's less time, less people, you know, less trust in yourself. Over time, you're gonna build that. Saturn and Air, it's all about careers and obviously like HR, PR, really being able to stabilize people's opinions and understand your messaging, understand the message around everyone around you as well, and being able to kind of work with that. And then once again, Saturn and Water, there's a very like intuitive kind of working with those sorts of careers, very sensitive and in those sorts of spaces. So yeah, there's a lot there, and I could talk about this for a lot longer because I love Saturn. And obviously I've talked about all these signs in specific outside of Aquarius and Pisces, but that'll be next. So I'm looking forward to that. And obviously if you guys like this, please like this video. I love what I do. I love being able to do this. And my goal is to be able to just help people with what I do, with sharing my message and sharing these things. And so I very much appreciate every single one of you that have come across this video, whether early on, later on, whatever it might be. And obviously this playlist is down below. You're welcome to kind of bop around it and see, look to your specific Saturn ruler as well. So if your Saturn's ruled by Mars, look to your Mars, so on and so forth, for more context as well. And of course, if you like the way that I read, you like the way that I talk, feel free to reach out to me down below. My website, all those things are down there. So thank you so much for being a part of this and watching this. And I just hope this helps literally anyone, even if it helps one person. That's all I care about at the end of the day. So thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. And I will talk to you guys soon.